All right, you all, welcome, welcome. I can't believe it's finally here. Here it is, Gettysburg 155. You are on the American Battlefield Trust Facebook page, and this is Gettysburg 155 Live. We'll be on Facebook mostly. We'll be on YouTube sometimes. No specific times. It depends on tech and other things, and we'll see, how we can come along. So just check on this. Share this as soon as you're on. Right now, you all share this on your page so we can make sure as many people get to learn about American history and care about the Civil War and where we came from as possible. I'm Garry Adelman with the American Battlefield Trust. If you can't tell from the shirt, that's Chris White behind the camera. That's his little nod. Dan Davis, American Battlefield Trust. He'll be talking about cavalry and other stuff. Doug Douds, you might remember him from Gettysburg 154 Live when we first got to do this licensed battlefield guide. U.S. Army War College, U.S. Marine Corps. Frederick, professor, longtime ranger here at Gettysburg. You might recognize some of him from some of our videos. We're going to have other special guests as well, some of whom are here, but we're not going to show right now because we have so many people and so many things going on for the next few days. I'm telling you, you will go to places that you probably haven't been to or seen before. We're going to have guests that you might know their names but haven't heard from them before. We've got some artifacts lined up. Oh man, do we. So, first of all, here we are on the first day's field. This was happening 155 years ago. Right now, the fighting was raging right on this ridge, McPherson's Ridge. Doug Douds, come on up. Why does McPherson's Ridge matter? Set up the battle.
All right, so remember, we're talking Gettysburg. This is midway in the Civil War, and both sides have a problem. There's hundreds of thousands of dead, and there's no end in sight. Robert E. Lee has brought his Confederate army up over that ridge line in the valley behind with the expectation that the Union Army would follow him and that once he got them out in the open, he would annihilate them in one climactic battle and provide the ultimate evidence to that northern population that this war was no longer worth it. So the way this works is we are sitting now just west of town. The way we have this is the Confederates are north and west. So Robert E. Lee spread out on a 55-mile arc when he learns from that spy, Harrison, that the Union Army is just across the Maryland border. He's going to issue his orders on the 28th of June to concentrate at Gettysburg. That is, come together, but don't bring on a battle until they're all here. At the same time, on the 28th of June, George Gordon Meade's going to get command of the Union Army. We're going to have Confederate cavalry. They're going to come through town. They're going to come right up this road, right out here. And what they're going to do is now they're going to go ahead and accomplish the first part of Meade's orders. Find Robert E. Lee, fight Robert E. Lee, and stay between Robert E. Lee and Baltimore and Washington. Buford is going to go ahead and realize the Union Army needs this road network too. He's going to string out his cavalrymen on a 7-mile arc, watching these 3 roads to the west and the 3 roads to the north. At 7:30 in the morning, 1 3/4 west of here, down this Cashtown Pike, what we're going to have is Lieutenant Marcellus Jones will borrow Sergeant Levi Schaefer's carbine. He'll rest it on the fence rail and squeeze off the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg. The first of 9 million shots fired here at the Battle of Gettysburg. You want to tell us a little bit about that cavalry fight?
I would love to. Now, what Buford essentially is doing is fighting what is called a covering force action. It's not a defense in depth. You may be familiar with the defense in depth from the Revolutionary War, Daniel Morgan's victory at the Battle of Cowpens. Essentially, what Buford is doing is pulling back his brigades, specifically William Gamble's brigade, which is here in this area, from one ridge line to the next, buying time for John Reynolds in the 1st Corps to come up and take position on the battlefield. Jared?
Good. No, hold on. Welcome, everybody. Man, I see a few hundred of you already. Thanks for joining. Keep sharing this stuff as you go along and keep reacting as you go along. I'm already looking for the best hashtag of the day. Haven't seen a great one yet. Of course, we haven't made any jokes yet, but man, there are some bad ones coming and some good ones coming. And this is interesting. I've stood here a million times and never noticed the echo that's coming right off of the McPherson barn right over here. The McPhersons, I believe he is a representative, everything like that. I wonder, Jared's really into civilian stuff. He's into a lot of other stuff as well. Tell us a little bit about the McPhersons and what's going on here during the battle.
Well, this property was owned by Edward McPherson at the time of the American Civil War, but he actually does not live here at the time of the battle. He is living in Washington, D.C. He is a clerk for the United States House of Representatives, and therefore he rents out this property to a 70-year-old farmer who lives here in Adams County, Pennsylvania. A gentleman who goes by the name John Slentz. John Slentz and his family live on what was a farming complex here. The remainder of the buildings burned down in the year 1895, but this barn is an excellent representation of what this structure looked like in 1863. John Slentz and his family were told by Buford's Union cavalrymen that this was not a safe place to be. They were told to evacuate into the town, find a place to find safe harbor, safe refuge, and when they came back out here, they were utterly horrified by what they found. Their farm was in a shambles. It had been used as a field hospital. The crops were trampled. The livestock was all gone. And worse yet, he finds soldiers of both sides buried on his property. And he was told, because of all the pestilence, the fear of disease, that he could not start to cultivate his land again and start to clean up this place until October. It was that bad. So it's really important to remember there's 175,000 soldiers in this battle, but this is also a community that affects everyday people too.
Absolutely. This is really cool. Check it out. I am starting to see some hashtags. Yes, I do have a hat or two with me. Don't worry about it. I have sunscreen on for now. Early morning jokes hashtag I see as well. But so far alone, I see Arkansas, Ohio, North Carolina, Michigan, Colorado, Florida, Alabama, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. I'm looking for our first other country at this point. Some of our good friends are joining us. Shelley Liebler, hello. Eric Dorr and Cheryl Reichling, good to see you as well. I can't even read some of the writing I already wrote down. Tom Gilmartin, our good friend that you've seen on here before. And Phil Spoggy is somewhere watching us. Man, would it be good to run into him. I hope he's up in
we had
Gettysburg.
England and Ireland this morning on the one you refused to come out to because you don't like cavalry.
Yes, let me mention that. At the first shot marker, which, by the way, cavalry action, nobody got hurt. What do you know? We did do a Facebook Live there earlier, and as we go on, thank you, Chris, go back to that one when we take breaks and stuff. Go back to the one we shot earlier today. Go back to Gettysburg 154 on our Facebook page. Just go to American Battlefield Trust, go to videos, and we have a playlist not far from the top, right near the top, of all of last year's. I think it's 20 different Facebook Live videos we did. I think we're better at it now. The quality's not quite as good back then, but you'll see some of what we did. And in fact, this year, we're deliberately not going to some of the places we did last year. For instance, last year we did the Union line in Pickett's Charge. Now we're going to do the Confederate advance this year. This year we're going to do Rose Woods. Last year we did the Rose Farm where all the death studies were made. So make sure you're referring back to those for a complete Gettysburg Facebook Live experience. If you guys are game, let's start walking. I want to talk a little bit more about the fighting on this ridge here. So whomever wants to jump in, I suspect it might be Doug. So the cavalry comes up. You're going to have the infantry replace the cavalry. The cavalry is, no surprise, not a particularly lengthy or bloody action. No such thing as a dead cavalryman. And you have, the Iron Brigade come up. And you also have Cutler's Brigade come up on each side of the road. Can you set this up a little, Doug?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about when those first shots happen. And as it was mentioned, the cavalry are using these north-south running ridge lines like speed bumps to slow down the Confederates as they advance. They're buying time for the Union infantry to arrive. So when we're talking about that first shot's fired at 7:30. All of a sudden, we're at 9:30 in the morning. 10 o'clock, you'd have Confederates. You'd have about 1,700 men from North Carolina and Mississippi to the north of the road. You'd have about 1,400 men from Alabama and Tennessee to the south side of the road. They'd be driving Union cavalry up this ridgeline when that first Union infantry would arrive. As Garry mentioned, you'd have Union soldiers to the north of the road, and then you'd have Union soldiers coming up. Remember, this is a meeting engagement, so they're coming up one at a time. It's not like anybody is here. They're literally clashing as they arrive. So you'd have the Iron Brigade that would be coming up across these fields just behind us, and they're going to slam into these Confederates as we approach these woods. Now, we're going to actually be driving this in a minute, and we can talk about that fight as we go. So what we should talk about maybe is just about these woods. It's one of the few places here that we actually have to use our imagination. For all the work that the American Battlefield Trust does, that the Park Service does to try and make this park look like it looked in 1863, it probably hasn't looked this close to the battlefield since 1863. But in these woods, now that would be a woodlot.
Let's slow down for a second.
Sure. That would be a woodlot, and so think about that. For any branch or tree that fell, we would go ahead and burn that, or we would cut down those trees, and we would make fences or repair our barns. Moreover, we'd let our sheep and goats graze in there, so that would be all open. We could see from one side to the other. We could see all the way down to the creek at the bottom of this ridgeline. So when we talk about soldiers fighting in woods, they're actually thinking about fighting in a well-wooded backyard. That's where this clash will happen. And like we said, they're going to drive those Confederates back through these woods. In fact, they're going to drive them down to the bottom of this tree line. And when they get down to the creek, the first Confederate general to be captured since Robert E. Lee took command of the Army of Northern Virginia gets captured down there. Young Private Maloney will grab up General Archer. Any other thoughts why we're here again?
Well, who knows? When Archer is brought to General Doubleday, what's that exchange go with? Something like Doubleday says, General, I am glad to see you. And what stern rebuke does Archer deliver?
I'm not glad to see you by a damn sight.
Man, that is tough 1863 words in my opinion. Now, I wanted to stop here. Thanks, Doug and Jared, because there's all sorts of stuff coming on here. In the Civil War, there's a lot of photos taken here, more taken during the year of the battle here than just about anywhere else. Probably Port Hudson might beat that. and a couple of other ones. But right here, by the time you took your horses away from your wagons and poured your sensitive chemicals on your plates and whatnot, it got really difficult. So you tended to take pictures in 4 different directions. So I will say that here's a 2-plate panorama. You might be able to catch Matthew Brady standing on a rail right over there, and it's really cool the way it works out, because especially if Chris lifts directly up from this particular picture, he's going to be looking at these woods right here. See, we know where the woods were. We know what kind of fence was where during the Civil War. Is this a Virginia snake rail fence, or a what's it called, stake and rider fence, as you call it, or a snake rail fence, or is it a post and rail fence over there? And by the way, this body of water here is right behind the camera. He can zoom right over there and see that this is a little quarry pond that was here right during the battle. And even best of all, there are 2 other photos taken from here. One of the McPherson barn, which I don't have here with me today, but this one right here, let me go down here. You'll just have to trust us because of the sun. You can see Matthew Brady and his assistant standing right in the field to our right front. And those are those woods sticking out over there, and those are Reynolds woods, and in the photo you could see they were much thinner, what Doug was saying about this stuff. So as we walk along this ridge, you not only set up the battle, but you set up the battlefield. This is the Park Service trying to make this place look the way it did during the battle, so we can understand what the soldiers are writing about. Now, let's start walking again, but as we do go, we got all sorts of actions coming up here, not the least of which is a local civilian, probably one of the most famous civilians of the Civil War, and also known as the hero of Gettysburg, Jared Frederick. Who am I talking about?
John Burns. And John Burns was a constable here in the Gettysburg area prior to the American Civil War. To the young people of the community, including the students of Pennsylvania College, he was known somewhat as a local curmudgeon of sorts. And in true Clint Eastwood fashion, on July 1st, 1863, deciding that he doesn't really care for these Confederates invading his home, he is going to pick up an old flintlock off of his mantle, and he is going to come out here and join the Union forces in the fighting right here in the area known as Herbst Woods.
Cool, good. So John Burns comes up here. He kind of comes up and tries to enlist with some Pennsylvania soldiers, right? And they say, "Great idea, sir. Join us." Is that what they say?
No, of course not, because anybody who sits out here as a commander is going to look at this old gentleman who shows up out here with his flintlock rifle and go, "Oh man, hey, we really appreciate your enthusiasm. You know where you might do better? Over in the woods with the other unit, because we don't want you actually fighting with us."
Good. So, of course, here you have John Burns with a statue here, because he goes on to become the hero of Gettysburg. He's 70 years old by the time he becomes famous a couple of months later, and there he is so famous that he makes the cover of Harper's Weekly. Abraham Lincoln hears of him in Washington, wanted to meet him, and did when he came to deliver the Gettysburg Address. In fact, they attended a political rally together where John Burns actually fell asleep in a pew next to Abraham Lincoln in a church that is still there. John Burns' statue used to sit on the other side of the fence behind the camera, about 50 feet, because this road, before cars started going 25 miles an hour and whatnot, these roads were built for carriages. This road used to come straight here, so the monument was further back. The base still exists within the weeds over there. Something else that happened right at the edge of these woods, supposedly, is the wounding of Harry Heath. Tell me, why did he not die when he got shot in the head, guys?
Go ahead, you got it.
So Harry Heath is coming through Chambersburg, and as he does, he realizes, it's time now that I've crossed the Mason-Dixon line that I need to improve my sartorial splendor. And so as he does, he picks up a new hat. Now, it happens to be too big for him, so what he does is he rolls up some newspaper and he puts it in the rim of his hat. Now, it just so happens that on the fighting of the first day here, a piece of shell is going to hit him in his head, but because his hat is too big, it's actually going to ring around his hat, and although he'd be wounded, he is not killed. Thank goodness for that too large of a hat. Speaking of hats,
think it might actually knock some sense into him, but it doesn't.
Yeah, you would think indeed. So a lot of deal is made, and we're going to get up and get into the car soon. Hopefully we'll keep connectivity, and we're going to go to a different part of the battlefield. See, last year we covered Oak Ridge really well. Today we're going to do McPherson's Ridge and then go over to Oak Hill, actually, in just a couple of minutes. Before we do, a lot of Civil War nerds, and again, you could be a Civil War enthusiast or a buff, a nerd, or a Civil War loser. I mean, if you're breaking down the order of battle by regiment or by company of regiment, nerd and buff ain't enough for you. Hashtag Civil War loser as you go along. So if you're a Civil War nerd or loser, you might know about the Heath tree, okay? It's important to know that there was no Heath tree. There was no Heath tree. In the 1980s, the park historian, Kathy George Harrison, attempted to figure out where it was that Heath was wounded. And by the way, that's H-E-T-H. Is it Heth? Is it Heath? I don't know. There's not a recording saying what it is. We think it's Heath because people that have that name today call it Heath. But in any case, she tried to guess where it was, and she approximated it was right inside those woods there next to a large old oak tree was approximately where it was. The heath tree wasn't marked in the 1860s, 70s, 80s, or even in the 19th century, or even for most of the 20th century. She just said that. She didn't say she identified the heath tree. People took that study and then said, it's the heath tree. And then when it fell down from a storm in the 1990s, I think it was, people were, oh no, the heath tree's gone. I don't even know if it was a witness tree. So keep that in mind. And I'd like to bring this thing with me on battlefields. I don't know if you're graphic novels fans, but we are, trying to reach other audiences, not just the same old ones with big, thick tomes. And man, one of my favorite drawings in this book. These are pretty good things, but here's General Heath with the newspaper shattering as he is knocked senseless here at Gettysburg. So I might show some of these throughout the day without mockery at all. I love these books, and I think it's a great way for younger people or older people to get involved in this stuff. This is Epic Battles of the Civil War, Volume 4 from Historical Comics as we go. It's time to go. Let's go. Now, sometimes getting into the car is the most difficult thing we can do while live. I'm going to check and see if you have any questions as we go along, and then we're going to drive along and see a little bit more of the battlefield. Oh, there's been a camera switch off to deal with logistics over here, and let's see what you all are asking as we go.
Well, one comment I think, Gary, is that people are saying we need to do more of these, do them in Arkansas, do them in other places. As you can tell, it takes an entire crew to do these, and it also takes money. So go over to our battlefields.org website, become a member if you're not a member, and that will be your way to support what we are doing. So be sure, battlefields.org.
Dan, come on over to the front here. You're going to sit in the front. I'll close the door for you, and then you can face toward the back.
Now it's hashtag history goes to the air conditioning.
All right, good. And you are watching Gettysburg 155 Live. I'm Garry Adelman. We're here with special guests Doug Douds, and you also have Chris White and Dan Davis from the American Battlefield Trust. We are on McPherson's Ridge. Make sure you share this on your Facebook page as we go along here. Hit us with your questions. Hit us with your hashtags as we go along. We are in McPherson's Woods right next to John Burns' statue, and we're going to take a nice little drive through McPherson's Woods. I'll ask Dan to point it forward so people can see here, and I'm going to talk even louder than usual so they can hear above the camera, or Doug can too. So Doug, here we are coming through McPherson's Woods or Reynolds Woods or Herbst Woods. What do people want to see when they're in here?
So one of the first things you're going to see is you're going to see some Iron Brigade monuments, because this is the Union units that arrive here. The 2nd Wisconsin, the first unit to arrive. They're going to accept a Confederate volley. In fact, by the time they get done fighting in these woods on the first day, they're going to attain 70% casualties of the 2nd Wisconsin. We're also going to see the rest of these units as they come through here. You can imagine, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to imagine the chaos of Union soldiers now running down this ridge line to our right and chasing those Confederates, and then of course they would use these woods as a bastion to fight from for the rest of the first day. Many people like to point out the North Carolina monument just over that white car there. In the afternoon, what we'd have is after the noonday lull, Confederates will attack again this position. In fact, the 26th North Carolina, they're going to lose 5 color bearers of their 14 color bearers that they lose on July 1st, just in crossing Willoughby Run at the bottom of that creek bed.
All right, just keep in mind, Doug, according to Niels, it is my dream job of battlefield interpretation. Hi, Jason. Thanks for saying hi. 150th bucktails. People love talking about the troops that wore little deer bucktails onto their hats. It gave them unit elan. We got a 24th Michigan fan here, and Garnett's Brigade. Woot woot! It's only the first day, and we already like Garnett's Brigade. Enthusiasm. Thy name is Garry or Doug. Wow, check it out. You've just been insulted, Doug Douds. As we come up toward the top of the ridge up here, let's move forward. I know there's some sun. Do the best you can there. Dan, and why don't you pan over to the right past this tree, and we can get a catch of Abner Doubleday. Abner Doubleday comes onto the field. There he is, with one division here. He's got less than 4,000 troops. All of a sudden, John Reynolds, he is Doubleday's boss. He's in charge of the corps. And if you come over to the woods on the left now, Dan, he is posting troops in there, troops of the Iron Brigade, when a Confederate projectile of some sort. No, we don't know who shot it. No, my God, we don't know if it was a sharpshooter or not. Were there even sharpshooters here? And Reynolds is in those woods, probably to the left of where that small marker is. When he is shot, bullet goes in the back of his neck, comes out his eye, and then you have John Reynolds dead, the commander on the field. Doubleday takes over for Reynolds. Someone has to take over for Doubleday. And for that guy and that guy and that guy. See, you have hundreds of people doing new jobs during the Battle of Gettysburg. There are 6 overall commanders of the Union Army on the first day alone. Keep that in mind. Now, we're looking back now to the left, back toward that McPherson's barn that we had seen before. We're headed up toward Oak Hill, which is just about a mile in front of us, and we have lots to say on the way. I'm going to keep looking for your questions over here as we go. Man, we have more than doubled the number of people coming here, and yes, double, they did stop to play baseball just as sure as Abraham Lincoln went to the Lincoln Diner after he got into Gettysburg. Iron Brigade is tough. Cassville, New York, 14th Tennessee. Yes, we're in the right area for that, and Iron Brigade was the toughest. Tell us what your favorite Civil War brigades are. Now, as battlefield guides, Doug and I have to often, drive from place to place. Doug, what are you usually saying right now on a tour?
Okay, so we talked about the Iron Brigade in the McPherson's woods, but now what we have is almost the exact opposite happens on the other side of the woods. What we're going to have is Davis's brigade will drive Cutler's brigades back into the woods to our right, and what they're going to do is they will now wheel to take the Iron Brigade in the flank, except the last Union Reserve, the 6th Wisconsin, combined with 2 New York regiments, would counterattack across these fields. They'd lose 1 man for every yard that they had advanced, and they go to hand-to-hand fighting here in the railroad cut.
Good, and in the railroad cut, of course, in 1996, what happened there that day, Doug?
So that's when they find the most recent casualty here on the battlefield. They find a femur sticking out from the side of the railroad cut, and of course, because there's hand-to-hand fighting there, they don't know whether he is a northern or a southern soldier. And so what they're going to do in 1997 is he's going to be buried in the Gettysburg National Military Cemetery with the oldest living Union widow and the oldest living Confederate widow, who represent all the mothers and wives and sisters who didn't have the opportunity to bury their husband or brother.
Man, is that a good point, Doug. And I think, as far as I remember, they found like a Yankee buckle and Southern buttons or something, so they didn't know who he was, and they seem to have found everything but, mostly everything but his spine, which allowed people to try to conjecture which unit he was from or which arm of the service he was from. I'm not going to say anything about any of that, but people like having, discussions about that. I will say that, people were buried where they fell in the Civil War. They then were exhumed and moved later to national cemeteries or Confederate cemeteries. They did not bury people, as a matter of course, or very rarely, together during or soon after wartime. It was just not something they thought of. And as much as they would take care of people tenderly, when the fighting was over for the day, they did not bury them next to each other in actual cemeteries. It was something that would not happen for a long time after the Civil War, actually. But now, for this soldier, they didn't know if he was Yank or Reb. What does it matter at this point? And for the several hundred, I don't know how many you usually say, could be 200, could be 800, bodies still on this battlefield, remains, what better place for them at this point? They did just discover a limb pit. What a cool terminology for it, and it was recently publicized at Manassas, where there were all sorts of amputations and other things done. And I think it's great to do archaeology, but the idea of sweeping the entire battlefield, let alone all the 10,000 places where people fought in the Civil War, looking for Civil War remains is just not reasonable.
So that's a great point, which is to say that this is all hallowed ground, which is all the more reason we should be taking care of it. And as we travel across this ground, we see some more monuments coming up, and certainly these monuments and monumentation here at Gettysburg happens mostly in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, early turn of the century. Here's the 3rd West Virginia Cavalry. These are part of Buford's cavalrymen who trade space for time, using these north-south running ridge lines like speed bumps to slow these guys down. Now, if you think about that, that's a pretty small monument. Now, if you look at the one coming up, this is to the 6th New York Cavalry. Also part of Buford's men who trade space for time using these ridge lines to slow down the Confederates as they advance on day one. But if you look at this monument compared to the 3rd West Virginia, you're pretty sure that the 6th New York Cavalry won the Civil War here on the morning of July 1st. When in reality, all that proves is it was a whole lot easier to raise money in New York City after the war than it was in West Virginia.
And when you marry into the Macy's family.
That doesn't hurt either.
Leave it to a cavalryman to be gratuitous.
You all are watching the American Battlefield Trust Civil War, Gettysburg 155 Live. We're on Facebook now. We might be on YouTube some of the time as well, so keep checking. We don't have an exact schedule, but we will be all over the place as much as we can, doing the best with our technology as we go along. And man, I really hope you jump on anybody that makes suggestions that we're not doing enough for you here. It is going to be the 3 hottest days of the summer, much like it was in 1863. We've got all the equipment we could possibly have. We've been practicing for a year at more than 150 different places, so we're doing our best as we go along. Oh man, Dan Davis is focusing on the 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry Monument. I'll just say that, that is a life-size cavalryman. It looks small, but he's life-size, and the cavalryman has equipment and other things specific to the cavalryman, such as guns like carbines that are easier to load and fire on horseback. Anything quick to add, Dan?
17th Pennsylvania Cavalry, if you're not familiar with them, one of the more accomplished regiments in the Army of the Potomac.
Good, good. So here we are on Oak Hill. Check out that monument up there. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about cannons. We got some special guests to meet up here as we go along. Again, please share this with your friends. We're about to hit a milestone. You know, we've got almost 500 people live with us right now, and that's people hopping off and on. I think we've had over 1,000 people on already. Share this with your friends if you haven't already. This is the second one of the day. We've already done the first shot marker. We've got lots more to come as we go along. So, you know, join us, share this. You can watch them later, and remember to watch last year's lives when we're down and going to other places. It's on our Facebook page under videos. We have a whole playlist just for Gettysburg 154. Ooh, oh my God, that was a jostle for the camera. My apologies for anybody who just threw up. We are on Oak Hill here. We can see some of our friends up here. We got some new friends to meet. But before we go up there, I don't know what your speech is, but let me just say that this is the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. It's dedicated in 1938. Franklin D. Roosevelt is here. As many as 250,000 people are here. I tend to think it's more like 80,000 people. What do you call that again when you inflate numbers, Chris, when it comes to seeing a reenactment or something like that?
Oh, I usually call them reenactor numbers.
Reenactor math. Reenactor math or something like that. This is made of Alabama limestone and Maine granite to symbolize how the North and the South were coming together. And in 1938, there were more than 1,800 Union and Confederate veterans here at the 75th anniversary. 75 years later, these guys were old, especially by 1938 standards. Their average age was 94, and the people who planned the dedication of this monument were happy and satisfied that only 7 veterans died during the dedication. I mean, these guys were falling away at that point, much like our World War II generation.
And what sticks out to me is, out of the 1,400 monuments on this battlefield, it's the only one with the term peace in its title.
You're right, and it's the only one specifically dedicated to peace, and the eternal flame atop dedicates peace eternal in a nation united. And one more probably apocryphal story is that we do know that John F. Kennedy came here, and we do know he has an eternal flame over his grave, and it is said that he may have said to Jackie, that's double passive voice disclaimer there, that, hey, eternal flame, that's a good idea, I kind of like that. And of course, he would be killed not long after that, and he does have an eternal flame. These are 2 of the very few eternal flames in the country. Let's get over to a new guest right over here. Man, you recognize her. Man, she's one of my favorite people. Dr. Carol Riordan, battlefield enthusiast, prolific writer, and I don't even know what else to say, but she likes talking about sad subjects here. She's happy and smiley enough now, though. Carol, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to go counter my character the whole next couple days. When you see me, unfortunately, well, we know every soldier has a story, but I'm going to be telling you some of the sad ones. Now, we've come up here to Oak Hill, and Gary's already told you about the big monument. Now we're in a position where General Ewell's going to arrive on the scene, and he's going to be looking out over the big open fields, and I'm going to have you slowly follow me.
Carol's getting good at this stuff.
Yeah, so you can take a look over my shoulder, and you can see pretty much what General Ewell would have been looking at. And what he would have seen would have been all the evidence of a battle that's been roaring for a couple of hours now. He sees dead soldiers in blue and in butternut and in gray, and he can see dead horses, and he can see all the dropped equipment that an army would have been carrying with them. And one of the things he would have seen would have been this. It's a drum. It's a drum that you can see today if you go to the Visitor Center, the Gettysburg National Military Park Visitor Center, and go in the museum, and you will see this. And it's the drum that belonged to a musician in the 147th New York by the name of Henry Mayo. And they'll tell you on the screen, on the, right next to the drum, that musician Mayo died here at Gettysburg. Think about that. It's a drummer boy. Usually when we think about drummer boys, we think about 15 or 16-year-old kids who came along with the armies. But not everybody fit that description. Drummer boy Mayo was actually in his late 20s. He'd been married for almost 11 years to his wife Lucy, and there were 4 kids at home. He doesn't fit the stereotype at all. And he was killed out here on the first day. Back in the summer of 1862, the Lincoln administration had pushed through Congress a bill creating something called a widow's pension. And if you wanted to get one of these things, you had to go through, it's a government program, folks, you had to go through all the paperwork. Well, Lucy Mayo up in New York has 4 hungry mouths to feed, and she applies beginning in September to get this thing. She has to prove, in fact, that Private Mayo was enlisted formally in the United States Army. She could. She had to prove that she was married to Private Mayo. She could. She had to prove that they were the parents of the 4 kids. She could. She had to prove that she was loyal to the Union. She could. What she could not prove was that Private Mayo, Drummer Boy Mayo, died here on July 1st. This ground that you see behind me was in Confederate hands at the end of the day. Some of the Union dead were buried very casually by the Confederates, but many were still lying here on July 4th in 4 days of hot July sun. Nobody could recognize Henry Mayo as among the Union dead. So her pension application just lay there and it wasn't acted on. Finally, in 1865, as the war was winding down, 2 officers in that regiment wrote affidavits saying that they saw Henry Mayo fall on July 1st, 1863. One said he was hit by a bullet, he died immediately with a smile on his lips. The other one said that he was hit several times, each time going down on one knee or propping himself with an arm and trying to drum as much as he could, and always encouraging his men to continue to hold the fight. The 2 pieces of evidence do not agree, but some clerks back in the pension office pretty much said, we're going to go with this, and they approved it. The widow's pension was $8 a month. Private Mayo has a story, so do a lot of other people. We'll be sharing some with you over the course of the day. Now, Gary's just itching to talk about something else. Here goes Garry.
Thanks so much, Carol. Carol just got more call-outs than anybody so far. Go Dr. Carol. Hashtag, Henry Mayo. Let's walk as we go along because we got more to talk about. Let's see, somebody asked about, the gas on top. What happens when they need to repair it or something like that? Well, in the 1970s, during the gas crunch, they actually put a cheesy light bulb up there. Horrible light bulb. Horrible looking, like kind of 70s looking gas lamp up there. And this flame was actually extinguished for a while the gas was actually short. And during a crazy windstorm, once in a while it'll actually go out. They did repair it once in a while, so sometimes it does go out. I think the message of the monument still is the same, of course, as we go.
Yeah, and Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania actually provides it for free.
Well, that's great to know. Hashtag support Columbia Gas. I also see Dan Wambaugh is joining us, man. They work really closely with the Civil War Trust to provide some of our uniforms through their company, Wambaugh and White. They make great stuff, and all the kids you see in our Generations events, they are wearing Wambaugh and White coats as we go along. I see more Colorado folk here. So shout out for your state as you go. We're approaching 500 comments. We have hundreds of people watching. This is the American Battlefield Trust's Gettysburg 155 Live. We might be on YouTube some of the time as well. We are on Oak Hill covering the first day. McPherson's Ridge is down that way, and this is Oak Hill. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We have a couple of more guests. We'll get back to Carol as well as we go, but let's talk artillery a little bit. I want to introduce our next guest. You may have heard his name, and if you haven't, you probably know his work. His name is Craig Swain. Come on over here, Craig. Thanks so much for being here, man. He has a blog that is my Bible for all things artillery. It's called To the Sound of the Guns. I am talking real detail stuff over here, and I thought it would be helpful to walk around a cannon with Craig to talk about artillery. He doesn't just do that. If you ever want to know what something looks like a historic site before you go, you want to read some of the signs, you're also the co-founder, if not founder, of the Historical Marker Database, which I use all the time. You can travel to a place and understand it. Man, it's a crowdsourced fiesta of detail as you go along. I will let you talk at some point, Craig. Did I get some of that right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's take a look at this here. This is a 12-pounder Napoleon, but specifically it's Confederate. What I always say when I come on the battlefield and I'm talking to people about cannons, these things can talk to you. You have to let it talk to you. The way you let it talk to you, let's start out. Look at this, if you can catch it with the camera, this small number here. It's 15 AF. The AF is standing for Augusta Foundry. If you follow me back around over here, you'll see the full pedigree of this gun. It gives you this line, Foundry and Machine Works. Up above it's kind of scarred off, but it says Augusta. This is a Confederate government cannon made by the Confederate government in one of their foundries that they developed during the war. Look at the back here. See how this is the shape of this? This is significant. We're going to go look at another cannon, and there's subtle differences here. Another thing to notice here, so look at the pits. This is very quickly made, very hastily made because the bronze doesn't get enough time to settle as it cools.
Well, hold on for a second.
Sure.
I said I was going to quiz you, man, and
Sure.
Here you are doing a whole full-on artillery thing. Let me just say that this thing that you hear about the North being sort of more industrial and the South being more agricultural is as real as it gets. Tell me if you disagree. The South never had as many cannons. Their cannons were never quite as good. They didn't have as much ammunition. Their fuses didn't explode as often. They didn't have enough of anything as you went along. Is that a somewhat fair statement?
However,
oh yes.
However, However, but keep in mind, at the moment that the Confederate government is formed, the Confederate government is actually the third most industrialized nation on the face of the earth, behind the U.S. and England. But there's a huge gap between the U.S. and the Confederacy. The Confederacy is only going to make about 450, 475 of these cannons. We don't know exactly for sure because the records aren't exact. We don't have all of the records, but there's not a lot of these that are made compared to there's one manufacturer in the North that will make well over 1,000 of these.
Okay, now time for some rapid fire quiz questions, because not everybody's an artillery person. So you see a lot of different kinds of guns on battlefields and whatnot. Between the carriages and the tubes, which part is usually original?
The tube itself.
Okay,
yes.
Good. And they usually see green or blue tubes, or you see black tubes. What kind of ordnance does the green or blue tubes fire?
Very good question, because this is typically smoothbore, but you'll get some rifles. This is bronze. This metal, because this gun is made in 1863. This metal before the war was either, it could have been a 6-pounder field gun, a 12-pounder howitzer, some other type of gun, which was lesser capability, and was melted down and made into this. It may have been a bell, but this metal was reformed and recast in 1863. You're going to ask, was this gun here at Gettysburg? Because it was made in 1863. Chances are not. It was made in Augusta, Georgia. It was probably sent to Braxton Bragg's army. This may have fought on Missionary Ridge, the famous photo of the captured guns. This could well be one of those guns.
That's good.
But we don't know.
And in some cases, you can actually track a gun's pedigree and figure out where it was when. Man, if you're a big enough buff, nerd, loser, and if you get lucky with the records, you might be able to figure out which gun was where. So, these blue or green ones that didn't look like that during the Civil War fired smoothbores. The black one usually fired rifles. Let's talk cannon parts. One-word answer. What is this thing?
We call this either a knob or a cascabel.
All right, that wasn't one word. What is this part of the carriage called?
This is the trail.
Good, this is the trail. What are these things sticking out from the side right here?
Trunnion.
Trunnions right there. What is this whole piece right here called?
You're calling this the barrel.
Okay, good, the barrel. What is the front of the barrel called?
The muzzle.
The muzzle. What is the back of the barrel called?
The breech.
All right, good.
What is going too fast for the camera call?
Oh my God,
Garry
check it
Adelman.
out. Good, finally, I've sped it up so much to cause trouble. Here we go. I guess what I want to get at too is when Craig, who has, man, a database of all this stuff, don't ask him for it, it's proprietary, but you look on the front of these, and if you were to see WPF, what would that mean?
West Point Foundry.
See, West Point Foundry, and they made primarily Parrott rifles. And what if it said PIC?
That is Phoenix Iron Works.
Okay, good. So the Phoenix Iron Company, or Phoenix Iron & Co., they make 3-inch ordnance rifles. So you can learn about guns and tell what kinds they are in a variety of ways, right?
Right.
Good, good. All right, you've got another 20 seconds. What else you want to say about artillery?
Talk about this location. If you look out in the distance here, we mentioned before, what are these guns firing at when they come into action here on Oak Hill? This is one of the best artillery platforms on the field. They're firing at the federal line that's 1,500 to 1,700 yards distance. This Napoleon gun, it's able to fire a shell 1,300 yards, and it takes it 5 seconds to get there. If it's going to fire a solid shot, it can reach 1,680 yards. So it can barely reach those targets. So the weapons that are doing the most damage up here are the 3-inch rifles that the Confederates have captured, or the Parrotts that the Confederates have captured from the Federals, or ones that Tredegar Iron Works have produced. And those are able to range out up to 2,400 yards with a 10-second fuse. So those are the guns that are engaging the Federals down there, while these Napoleons are being used for closer targets, the infantry that have moved up onto the ridge and such.
All right, good. Thanks so much, Craig. We're going to have Craig on more here because I know you like your artillery. I haven't been checking my phone, but I'll bet you have some artillery questions. I saw some of our people coming up and scribbling notes. Even us battlefield guides just learned a lot. Thank you so much, Craig. We're lucky to have you here again. To the Sound of the Guns. It is a blog. If he stops writing today, it is probably the best single resource for your artillery stuff. Head over there as you go.
Yeah,
what do you got,
we
Dan?
also have a new hashtag,
All right.
Craig Swain, Artillery Genius.
All right, hashtag Artillery Genius. I love it, man. That's really cool. We often don't get that many complimentary hashtags. Or hold on, wait, that's usually just me, actually, as a matter of fact. But keep hitting us with these things. Keep sharing this with your friends. We're going to wrap up on Oak Hill, but we still have more to cover. I want to bring Phil Spoggy up here. He might not be ready, but Phil Spoggy is one of the honchos over at just a great organization called the North-South Skirmish Association.
Yep.
Good to see you too, man.
Yep.
Recently gotten into shape himself. You know, he loses weight everybody says congrats. I lose a little bit of weight. People say I'm unhealthy. I'm happy for you though, nonetheless. And here is Phil. So Phil, you are into a lot of stuff. He's wearing an Iron Brigade shirt right here. We know he likes the Iron Brigade, but you like small arms. Why should people go out and see and hear small arms actually being fired live? What do you learn?
Well, I think you'll see the inherent accuracy of the mini or the Burton ball when you watch a North-South Skirmish Association match. We shoot in Winchester, Virginia twice a year on national matches. Shoot everything from rifle muskets, smoothbores, revolvers, full-scale artillery, mortars, breech loaders, you name it, we shoot it, and you can really see how these weapons do in a live fire environment versus a reenacting environment. And especially here, I mean, you've got one of the best cases of the accuracy, the deadly accuracy of the Civil War small arms. We're looking down Iverson's pits and what Baxter's men did to Iverson when he was surprised and they rose up and the deadly volley in a shorter time than I'm speaking decimated Iverson's men. So there you go. There's the Civil War small arms at work.
You're so right. A lot of the stuff that you learn about and read about, it's not just the way you hear it. And what I liked about going to an NSSA match, and there's a hyphen in there somewhere, you'll get it, is that, you know, all this stuff I've read about, you hear about the whistling and whatnot, and here I was a good 50 feet or 100 feet from the firing line, and there it was. And it was just like they wrote about. Man, seeing mortar shells, you know, or mortar balls fly up into the air like bowling balls. I mean, you could imagine those things coming towards you. Could you duck out of the way in time or not? Seeing a rifled artillery, you know, shattering something in the distance. There's nothing like it. Now, not everybody, and let the record show, hashtag Dr. Reardon rules, she was just going along with me off camera there. You know, there's nothing like it. We all, you know, sort of engage with the Civil War in a different way, right? Some people tent out, some people dress up, some people collect, some people speak, right? Some people don't know a single other person that's into it, and they just enjoy it in their mind and on social media and whatnot. Whatever's comfortable with you, whatever you like to do, however you're into it. But I do suggest don't go at this alone. Join a round table, get to know friends, go to an NSA event or something like that. As we speak right now, the 147th New York, I passed them on the way up here, are marching from the Kadori farm up to their positions in these fields behind us, where they're going to do a special program as well. Again, there's nothing like Gettysburg anniversaries. Sure, it's hot, sure, it's crowded, but man, is it worth it. Try to make one day as we go along.
Yeah. One word, what Garry is talking about, everyone in all those groups shares one thing, and that's passion. And you know, the passion is the important thing that we have here and in anything you do with the American Civil War. So just get out and do it.
Good. Thank you so much, Phil. Now, this is one of about 18-ish videos. We'll do some impromptu ones as we go along these days. I'd like to invite any of our guests. No, let's bring Carol back up, because I know she's got more. You know, poor Carol, she comes prepared to give 4 or 5 accounts, and then I end up cutting things off when she's only a couple in. So pick another one, Carol, if you will. Everybody loves these things.
Okay, that's easy enough to do.
Good.
Well, we know that when we come up here, one of the things we talk about is the advance of Rhodes's division, and we spend a lot of time here talking about the advance of Iverson's brigade. And we're up here and we were always bashing Iverson soundly around the head and shoulders because of all the things he doesn't do. He doesn't send out skirmishers. He doesn't go forward with his men. He basically says, oh, I left them, I decided to exonerate all but a few, when he himself never left this hill. And we get so obsessed with the senior officers that sometimes we forget the consequences of poorly conceived plans and bad orders. And out there in that field, straight ahead of us, okay, I'll shift over here, that field right ahead there, that's where Iverson's brigade is going to go up against a Union line that, well, basically they really don't know where it is. They're going to find out in the worst way possible. One of the survivors is going to say, as they were out in the field, all of a sudden we heard 2 horrific sounds. The first was the sound of 1,000 hammers being cocked back to full cock, and the second was the word fire. In a matter of just about 15 minutes, half of Iverson's brigade of about 1,500 men are going to fall in that open field. And numbers on that scale are not really comprehensible. What you have to do is take it down to a much lower level. Company D of the 23rd North Carolina Infantry, one of Iverson's regiments, was called the PD Guards. And just to tell you a little bit about them, when they came here, well, at the end of the battle, they're only going to have about 7 men left out in that field, taking the brunt of all the small arms fire that Phil just told you about. They would end up with 3 men killed or mortally wounded, 5 who were wounded but managed to get back to their own lines, 12 taken prisoner, many of them captured. Only about 7 men in that company survived this fight. That's how devastating this situation would be for them. One of them was a young man, one of the fallen was a young man by the name of Dudley Cole. And Dudley was one of the first soldiers to enlist from his little hometown in North Carolina. He enlisted on the 30th of May, 1861, before any big battle took place. He was only 17 years old at the time. But he was here, and he served pretty faithfully until he was captured at Fox's Gap back during the Antietam campaign. He spent a couple months in a Union prison till he was exchanged in November of 1862, and he was eager to get back into ranks. He served faithfully until he fell right here. What happened to him, we do not know. He's probably one of the unknown dead that rests down in a cemetery, maybe down in Hollywood in Richmond, or maybe down in Oakwood in Raleigh, but we just really don't know. Probably nearby in line was a private by the name of William Gilbert. Private Gilbert really didn't want to be here. He was not a volunteer from 1861. He was a conscript. He was drafted into the Confederate Army, and he had ended up in the ranks on the 6th of September of 1862. He would be hit out here in the leg, and he would end up undergoing an amputation at the upper third of his left thigh, and he would find himself over in the Letterman Hospital that we all know about, over on the east side of town. He's going to die as a consequence of that wound, but because he was in that hospital, we knew where his grave was. It was put down on a register, and in 1871, in the first transport of Confederate dead from this battlefield back to southern cemeteries, his would be one of the identified sets of remains that would end up back in his home state of North Carolina. The man who could not wait to go to war, Private Cole, we do not know his ultimate resting place, but the man who never wanted to come here to Pennsylvania in the first place is resting back home in North Carolina.
Very cool. Carol, I can't even keep up with you all. First of all, the record is now going to Italy. Thanks so much for joining us all the way from across the pond. West Virginia is in Ohio, continues to win. And man, is Phil Spoggy popular. Not only Phil, but let me get it right. Phil is awesome. Ohio Nut hashtag, and also hashtag Phil's hat is great. I've been trying to beat this thing up for 2 years now.
I'd like to add.
He's got real black powder burns.
Chris?
Yeah, I'd like to add that my favorite hashtag is Carol Riordan, voice of calm in a storm of Garry.
Excellent, good.
Thank you.
Carol continues to be popular. Excellent. Hashtag excellent Carol. Hashtag Carol is excellent. What is that guy on? I don't know which one they mean by that, nor do I know what you mean when you say hashtag beanpole. God, that's not very nice to say about one of these people. Hashtag Iverson's Pits. And a lot of you were saying thank you for doing this, okay? You know, we're getting, some of us are at least, getting paid to be out here at our favorite place talking about it. Thank you, actually, for supporting battlefield preservation, for getting people interested in history, for sharing this on your Facebook page so that more people can engage with our history. Let me invite up Jared, Doug, anybody else that wants to come up, Dan, Craig. What else you got to add before we tie up? Because we've been talking for a while, what do you know? And somebody's been hogging the screen the whole time. Jared?
You know, when we talk about battlefield vistas, people often think of Little Round Top. That's one of the best places to just kind of soak it all in. Additionally, though, this place right here, Oak Hill, I think this is also one of the best places where you can get an understanding of how all of the pieces of this massive puzzle come together. If we look to the west, we can see the South Mountain Range, part of the broader Blue Ridge Mountains. And on the other side of that mountain is the invasion corridor for the Army of Northern Virginia. And if we were to go on the other side of that mountain, eventually we would find ourselves in Maryland and then Virginia. So we can kind of see in the broad scheme of things how all of this comes into being. If we look in the other direction to our east and just step out here ever so slightly to broaden our vista a little bit, we can see the community of Gettysburg itself. We'll be talking about the community a little bit later on, but geographically speaking, Gettysburg is kind of in a bowl. And we can see Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill. We can see Cemetery Ridge emanating from all of that. And as we'll be discussing further, both in regards to combat and geography, the town of Gettysburg, 2,400 people there, it is in the eye of the storm.
So we shouldn't lose track of, hey, there is a battle going on here. With all these neat stories, monuments, the artillery, ultimately it's engaged in a larger process here, which is the Civil War. So one of the reasons it's great to visit a battlefield is that you get to go stand on this ground, to stand where they stood, suspending that you know how it turned out. In this case, to stand in Richard Stoddard Ewell's shoe and go ahead and assess what you should do.
Wait, you said shoe.
Well, because if we know.
Well done.
So, you know, he loses his leg, but he gains a wife, and that's a fair trade. So, here's how this works. When you think about Ewell coming out of this tree line behind us at about noon, remember, and he realizes he's on the flank of all the Union soldiers he can see, even though he sees a couple trickling down from town, he's like, it doesn't get any better than this. I'm on high ground, and I'm on the flank of the entire Union Army. If you're a Civil War general, you couldn't serve it up any better. And then he remembers that order that Lee sent. Don't bring on a battle until we're all concentrated. And so when you come here and you stand on this ground, remember you must suspend that you know how it turned out, because they certainly didn't know how it turned out. They didn't know how they were going to turn out before Iverson's men went into those woods. And that's the real joy of coming to a place like this, to gain the perspectives that they had while they were here.
Yeah, and just to echo what Doug just mentioned, for me, when I got up here, it's the 155th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. I had to take a moment, just turn around and look down toward McPherson's Ridge behind me. It's an incredible moment. These battlefields can teach us so much. They're great resources for classrooms to learn about the past, learn about the people who came before us. We stand on their shoulders. And I just encourage everyone, if you have an opportunity, come out to a Civil War, War of 1812, Revolutionary War battlefield.
Antonio Cesano asked if he was the distance record holder. Oh, you were. You had two people from Ireland challenging you for your title, but no. Seoul, South Korea is now our furthest spot of the day. Yeah, wow, good. Lots of people jumping up for that one. We have also got Wisconsin, Missouri now joining us. Hashtag hydrate, by the way. That's good advice for all of us as we're out here, especially as it gets higher. 3 people from my home state of Illinois, 1 person from my adopted state of Maryland, New York, Texas, North Carolina, Tennessee, Washington joining for the farthest U.S. state so far, Alabama, and others as we go along. I think we are going to tie things up now, unless I see anybody else jumping up right here. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. This is Gettysburg 155 Live, and proving that I can speak like the rest of them. Let me tie things up right now, and thank you very much for supporting us, for supporting battlefield preservation, and join us as we're around for at least 4 more videos today, maybe more. Unconfirmed reports suggest we might be doing more the first day today. Look for us as we go. We might be on YouTube as well. Again, thank you to all our guests, and thanks for supporting Battlefield Preservation.